What's up, everybody? Carolina Jackpot checking in. It is Sunday, April the 29th, 2018. And, a lot of times us college football fans during the off season, we get to talking about all kind of different topics. What if this? What if that? We like to make up a lot of superlatives, a lot of lists that really don't have a lot of meaning. The NFL draft kind of, gets our appetite whetted just a little bit, which we had over this past weekend. But really, it's just not enough. So some of the discussion here lately has been, especially in our area, I listened to a radio talk show the other day, one of my friends does out of Columbia, and we were discussing different college football teams and who they should play every year. All of our teams normally play one out-of-conference opponent that is pretty much a staple every year. It's you've got Clemson, Georgia, or Clemson, South Carolina, Georgia, Georgia Tech. You got Florida State, Miami, North Carolina State. Those type games. Louisville, Kentucky. They're going to happen every year. But there are some games that could be very interesting that I think should happen every year amongst some of these teams. And today, just to keep this thing a little bit short and concise, we're going to do the SEC East. In a few days, we'll do the SEC West. But I'm going to look at some SEC East teams and just throw some things out there to you. These are some teams that I think that these guys should play every year. Please offer your feedback in the comment section below. Positive, negative, in the middle, what have you. Doesn't matter. This is some things that I think would benefit the game of college football. First off, we're going to start with the Vanderbilt Commodores. And who do I think they should play every year? None other than our friends of the Duke Blue Devils. Okay, Vanderbilt and Duke have not played since 2008. Vanderbilt once won 6 in a row in this series. They lead it 7-4. And interestingly enough, the first meeting between the two was in 1986. They're separated. It's a few hours between Nashville and Durham. Actually, probably 6-7 hours if you were driving. It's a pretty decent trip. But I think these two guys match up pretty well on the field. You have similar type players from similar type backgrounds. I just think this would be a good meeting every year. Of recent vintage, I would certainly say that Duke would hold the advantage over Vanderbilt. They put a better product on the field. But you can never sleep on the Commodores. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're ranked number 1 in the country. You cannot sleep on Vandy. And the same goes for Duke. So let's see about Vanderbilt and Duke hooking it up and playing every year. A home-and-home type deal. Next off in the SEC East, we have our friends the Missouri Tigers. And who should they play every year? This one was kind of stretch. I had to do a little bit of research. But Kansas State. Let's look at this. Missouri leads this all-time series 60-32. People think about Kansas State, they think national powerhouse. Well, these guys weren't a national powerhouse until the 90s. Bill Snyder started building something special in Manhattan, Kansas. A lot of folks say that he has done the single most miraculous job with a college football program of anyone. He's been there 2 times. Actually, he left after a 2005 season and ended up bringing him back a few years later. 1993 through 2005. Kansas State won every game between these guys. Missouri holds the series edge 60-32 over the Wildcats. They're old rivals in the Big 8 and then later the Big 12. 246 miles apart. Well, it's not really that far when you're way out there in Missouri and you're way out there in Kansas. There's just not a whole heck of a lot to do between the two cities. I think it would be a good trip for both these teams. I think it would give both of them some exposure into a base that gets recruited by some other conferences now, and maybe rekindle some old magic. I think this would be a fired up type game, and right now I would think Kansas State would have the upper hand between these two guys, but Missouri's been there before. They've done well since they've been in the SEC. They have been to 2 SEC championship games, won the East twice. The East wasn't very good in the years that they won it, but you can't take that away from them. They're the new guy on the block, and pretty much thought to have a mediocre team, and they still made it to Atlanta. So let's see the Missouri Tigers and the Kansas State Wildcats renew that old Big 8 rivalry and hook up every year. This next one took some thought. Kentucky Wildcats. Who should Kentucky play every year? Who can they play every year? Thought about one opponent, but I thought that one was a little bit better suited for another team, and we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And I'm going with, maybe laugh at me, I'm going with the West Virginia Mountaineers. Now, these guys really don't have much of a football history together. West Virginia actually trails in this series 11-8 to Kentucky. However, I was looking up some stuff, and most of my information on this stuff's come off the website Winsipedia, as far as wins, losses, all that good stuff. West Virginia is the 14th winningest college football program of all time. I did not know that. I would not have placed them that high. I thought they were maybe in 30s or so. I know they've had some good teams in the past. Lately, they have not been what they once were. I think they'll get back there. These two guys are 330 miles apart. Have not met since 1983, the end of the 83 season when they played in the Hall of Fame Bowl. Kentucky kind of, slumped around there, kind of a mediocre team. West Virginia, maybe a notch above Kentucky. I would think that West Virginia would probably have the upper hand in most of these meetings, but Kentucky, wanting to broaden themselves out a little bit. Let's just be real. There's not a lot of great high school football athletes in the state of Kentucky, but there are in the West Virginia area, the Pennsylvania area, and playing the Mountaineers every year could kind of give Kentucky a little bit of a rub in an area of the country that they're not necessarily known to recruit in. Let's see what would happen if the Wildcats and the Mountaineers hooked up every year. I think that would be quite an interesting matchup. The Florida Gators, you should see this one coming. The U, Miami. This team's played every year from 87 to 2000. However, they did not play after that for a while. Make sure I'm right on this here. Yeah, they played in a bowl game at the end of the 2000-2001 season, and then they played for a while. They played sporadically in a couple bowl games since. The last meeting was in 2013 and was actually won by Miami, by Al Golden's crew, 21-16. They hold a 29-26 series advantage over the Gators. Of course, Miami with some really dominant teams there in the 80s, really smothered the Florida Gators. These teams are 340 miles apart. They both, kind of pull some of the same kids, but I'm talking about in the same state. 340 miles distance is a long way, and there are a lot of good high school football players in the state of Florida. Certainly enough to go around for both these guys and Florida State. And then some other guys come in and pick some of them up. But they had kind of a bitter rivalry there for a while. Don't really know why it was ended, but would certainly like to see the Florida Gators and the Miami Hurricanes hook back up on a yearly basis again. I think it would be good for the state of Florida. Would definitely be a big moneymaker, whether it's played in Gainesville or whether it's played in Miami. Miami has kind of amped their game up and gotten their attendance in line a little bit more so than what it should be in recent years. For a while there, you'd go to their games and, as an old saying says, it looked like, people sitting in the stands there, it looked like a piss hole in a snowbank. I mean, it's like, you got this big cavernous stadium there and, 20,000 fans at a game for a program that's nationally ranked. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But they're coming back. I think their fan base is starting to support them a little bit more now. So let's see the Gators and the U hook back up again on a yearly basis. South Carolina Gamecocks, my Gamecocks. I had a little bit of a hard time with this one, but I settled on, nope, not those guys. That's Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech is going to play Tennessee every year. Whoops, I skipped over one there. These guys, it's a 6-3 series advantage for Virginia Tech. They played a few games from 1896 to 1937, however, did not play again until 1994 in a bowl game, and then they played in a bowl in 2009 with each team winning one. I think they're both trying to establish themselves again. Both teams were pretty powerful back in the late 90s. And Virginia Tech kind of fell on some times. They went to the ACC championship game in 2011 and lost to Clemson. They kind of fell off the radar for a few years after that. And then Coach Beamer finally left Virginia Tech. Justin Fuentes taking over there. Of course, you got Jeremy Pruitt, who's taking over as the head man in Tennessee, replacing Butch Jones. I think this could be an interesting matchup. They both played in Bristol 2016 season at the Bristol Motor Speedway, kind of a gimmick type game with Tennessee winning in a game that drew a huge crowd. So I would like to see these two hook up every year. They both, tough, kind of hard-nosed football teams. They both kind of recruit from the same area there. And I think they could develop quite a fierce rivalry with each other if paired together every year. Now, my South Carolina Gamecocks. We're going to play North Carolina every year. I think that's very important for these border rivals to go at it. This is a 34-19 series advantage for UNC. Most of the games were played when South Carolina was a member of the ACC, which we left after the 1970 season. South Carolina's won 3 in a row in this series, including the 2015 Belk College football kickoff game. South Carolina won against a UNC team that would eventually, that would be their only regular season loss. Until they played Clemson in the ACC championship game. They finished up like 12-2 on the year. Had a really good season. North Carolina's had some good teams in the past. They hadn't been as good the past couple of years. South Carolina won games from 88 through 1990 here. They only played a couple of times prior to that in the 1980s. South Carolina won 31-13 in 1981 in Chapel Hill against a team that was ranked number 2 in the nation, number 2 or number 3. Our quarterback that day threw 16 for 17 and led the Gamecocks to a big upset victory. But this would do a lot, I think, for recruiting for both schools. Would be a good trip for South Carolina fans to go to Chapel Hill every other year, and vice versa with the fans of the Baby Blue come down to Columbia every other year. This could develop into a really good rivalry, I believe, given time. And that recruiting thing is huge. And last but certainly not least, and I think everyone probably has this one pretty well pegged out, the Georgia Bulldogs. Who are we going to play every year? Georgia State. The Panthers. No, I'm kidding. It's Clemson, the Tigers, the Taters. You know what? These guys had quite a rivalry over the years. I think Georgia leads the series 42-18. So they've played quite a few times. Have not played since 2014. Georgia won that game 45-21, I believe it was. Of course, Clemson had upset them in Death Valley the year before. Well, it wasn't really an upset. It was a kind of a toss-up game. Clemson won that game by 38-35. There were no games from 2003 to 2013. UGA dominated the series from 1914 to 1954. Clemson kind of dominated it in the late 80s. They met 3 times in the 90s, all won by UGA. UGA won 30-0 in 2003. These two schools are about 75 miles apart, and they too recruit a lot of the same players. They got a lot of split households in the area. A Clemson man married to a Georgia woman and vice versa. This would just be a great rivalry. It should be played every year, and I definitely think this one should be started back up. Check out the next video, guys. Hope you